Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Dune Prophecy. Episode 5 is out now, and the penultimate entry has a lot to unpack from it. Throughout this video, we're going to break down the things within it and talk about how they tie in with the Duneverse. Firstly though, just a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll get into the episode. This video is sponsored by FanHome. They're the best place for nerdy collectibles, and they're offering you a chance to boldly go where no one has gone before. That is, with a brand new Star Trek Starships diecast collection. Featuring amazing replicas of the iconic starships, this is the best way to build out your collection. Ranging in length from 7 to 10 inches, FanHome have proudly partnered with Star Trek and Paramount to bring you this exclusive list of new starships. Each meticulously crafted model includes a base for display and is delivered in a collector's box. Departure is happening now, and you can engage with the collection throughout 2025 and beyond. In the collection, you'll get lots of incredible insights into the ships themselves, and also 3 amazing vessels to begin your journey with. This includes the USS Titan, as seen in the recent series Picard. This is a Neo-Constitution starship class that was under the command of Captain Liam Shaw. We also have the USS Stargazer, Sagan-class Federation starship operated by Starfleet in the early 25th century, which was equipped with Borg tech. On top of this, you get the USS Farragut from Strange New Worlds, where James T. Kirk was assigned to his first tour, later being promoted to first officer. I absolutely love this collection and FanHome, and if you click the link in the description, you can start your collection now. Beginning at just $195, that's an incredible offer that will help you live long and prosper while showcasing your love for Star Trek. Click my link in the description to check out the offer and begin your collection today. Thanks. Okay, so lots of things fall into place come the end. We have the capture of Keiran, more on Lila's possession, and also the truth about Desmond. The latter of which is that he's part Harkonnen and part Atreides, which pretty much narrows it down to Tula being his mother. Well, it does narrow it down, to be fair. The fusing of the two bloodlines is also extremely important, and this is what the sisterhood planned to bond from the Kwisatz Haderach. That wouldn't be for thousands of years, but initially they wanted Feyd to wed Jessica's daughter. It was their child that would then be said to fulfill the prophecy, and the witches would have a figure that they'd be able to control on the throne. Paul and Jessica also learn that they're from the Harkonnen bloodline in both the book and films. In the work, this comes at the tent when Paul asks his mother to study her face in the mirror. There she'll see the features of the family, and it confirms they're one and the same. In the films, they do it at the Water of Life ceremony, but either way, the two families are already tied. Desmond being a bond of them thousands of years earlier also explains how it's all tied together. We will talk about his powers later on, however, what it does is confirm and shut down a couple of theories. There were some in the camp that thought that Desmond was a machine and the eyes we kept seeing belonged to none other than Omnius. Due to what Lila says later, it's becoming clear it was Leto II. If he was looking at his own bloodline, he'd have access to Desmond, and therefore it makes sense that that's the case. Anyway, we begin with ships descending on Seleucus Secundus. The arrival of Francesca, it brings a little gut punch, and we see she's escorted to the palace. We then catch Desmond getting his new attire. He's now fully integrated into the Carino household, with him getting the dark uniform. This makes him look even more like Rasputin, and at the end he hooks up with the Empress. Rasputin having an affair with the Tsar was heavily rumoured as well, so it's clear they're playing off the figure. Also, love how he has a hidden blade. Hidden blades are something that are often referenced in Dune, with Feyd possessing one inside his suit. This was intended to be used in the duel to kill Paul. However, Paul flipped the script and he used it against him, and in the movie he stabbed Feyd with a blade that he wasn't paying attention to. Hidden blades sum up the treachery that is often part of the universe. We also see as he grabs a rag which is similar to the one he brought into the kingdom. This held a holocron device that the Emperor watched, and it's all tied in with the character. As he leaves, we also get an eye-shaped layout with a circular doorway and pupil figure in the middle. Outside, we also witness the newly assembled Emperor's army, which are the Proto-Sardaukar. Millennia later, Seleucus Secundus would be transformed into a prison planet built to train the Emperor's legions of soldiers. This is why it looks vastly different in Dune Part 1, because it's been stripped away of everything that made it bright. The Emperor also mentions Old Earth. In the Duneverse, it's often referred to that Terra or Old Terra. Come Paul's time, people even forgot it was where humans came from. People thought the Golden Age of Earth was a myth and that it was similar to the Garden of Eden. Come Leto II's time, it no longer exists, though he was able to witness it in his genetic memory. The Gesserit mentioned in the book Chapter House as well, and even etched paintings and carvings of it to stand as a time of great things. To them, everyone was having a good time, liking the videos and hitting subscribe. Here the Emperor brings it up as a time in which retribution against terror was swift and he wants their values defended. Who is against him though is Inez, who storms out the ceremony. She's sort of fitting the rebellious child archetype, which we also saw with people like Alia. Desmond suggests letting the fleet reign overhead as it will showcase the strength of House Corrino. Throughout our videos, we've often talked about how he's a complete opposite to the Sisterhood, and this is another clear example. Whereas they passive-aggressively move in the shadows, he's overtly ruling through fear. He's also at their side instead of a sister, well for now anyway, sending in Francesca. I don't know if you should be staring at another woman like that in front of your wife, mate. As we learn, this is Constantine's mother, and he's considered the illegitimate heir. Ned, you bastard! Now, the head of houses sleeping with the sisters was actually commonplace throughout the times. Paul's dad, Leto, actually had another lover who gave him a son before Paul was ever born. If you go off the Brian Herbert stuff, which I know some of you don't see as canon, but he's behind the show, so it is worth bringing up. Jessica was then sent to the house, and Leto's lover suspected something was up. Eventually, she was driven insane and attempted to kill Leto, which led to the death of her son. However, the sisters felt like they'd gotten hold. As we learn, this is part of a process and something the Gesserit carry out. We learn that this is done through using imprinting, which isn't the really weird one from Twilight. Basically though, this is the men being seduced so hard that they subconsciously favour the sister doing this. It's like a sort of psychic-powered simp hypnosis to put that pussy on a pedestal. Margot Fenring was a master of this, and in the movie, we saw her manage to subdue the psychotic Feyd right there. Also, it's Leia Sadu, so I mean, come on guys. Boiled down to its basics though, this was another way for them to secure bloodlines. These beautiful women were often picked due to the house leader's type, and they were there to seduce his mind and body. In having this in place, it gave greater control and basically made all the men act like the Emperor. So it's another tactic of manipulation, and we see how Constantine further wins round his father's trust. A Bene Gesserit child also fits in with the franchise, as Paul was of course one as well. Going to Inez's room, we see as Constantine apologizes. Inez is fully in the doghouse now after trying to make Desmond look bad. This might be a reach, but it kind of mirrors how Valia was looked down upon by her family, and now Inez is out in the cold too. Across at the temple, we also see the acolytes going through their training in which they have to hold their hand to a flame. The students are taught how to distribute pain across the body, and it's about thinking through a problem instead of acting instinctively. The way they do this looks just like when Paul had to put his hand inside the box during the Gom Jabbar test. There it was to see if Paul was human or animal. The Order basically view most people as animals that act without seeing the full outcome of their actions. They'll instinctively withdraw their hand away from pain, but a human can use logic to think through what's happening. So that's why they have to be able to do it, and they also discuss the shared nightmare. The talk of the mind being the highest master also sounds like the origins of fear is the mind killer. It's also interesting that the death of Kasia originated in the fear part of her brain, with fear literally being the mind killer. Taken by Tula outside, we then see some sisters training in white. While Star Wars clearly came after Dune, which we discussed in previous videos, seeing the younger students, it did remind me of the prequels where we saw the young Padawans training. Should get themselves some t-shirts that say Spice Girls, eh? And if you'd like that, mate, then check out our merch store right below the video. Not only do we have that for the series, but we've also got ones for Star Wars Skeleton Crew that says Sith happens. On top of that, we also have ones about how if you're gonna spoil a movie, Warner brother, you get that, mate, you get that, and it all helps videos like this get made. Now it turns out Jen hasn't had the dream, and this is something we saw last week. She woke up and walked through the beds without her being affected. It's likely that she's not an Atreides, and this is why her mind doesn't see Leto. I personally don't believe he's looking back in time, and instead, I think it's prescience that's seeing him.
It wasn't a nightmare. It was prescience.
Let me know what you think's going on, but I know there's also the possibility that he could be looking back. Of everything I know the Dune universe though, no one can do that and affect the past, so it's more likely that they're predicting him. Either way, Jen leads Lila back through her voice, which is something Tula did to Valia. It highlights the bonds of the sisters and why they rely so much on each other. Now from here we cut to Francesca and see her looking at a painting. Shoutouts to our editor Matt, who pointed out that this was seen in episode 1. During the genetic memory sequence, you could catch this at one point. Getting a better look at it, we can see a row of sisters at the front. They're shrouded in their veils and not standing up at the top near the Emperor. Instead, who is a figure like Desmond, with this picture possibly predicting the future. We also have the Empress in the middle, who's wearing a long red dress. This is what Inez wore at the engagement ceremony, and it's a striking figure in the middle. However, I did wonder if this was actually Francesca. It doesn't look too much like the Empress, and at one point the pair would of course been concubines. Francesca being close to the Emperor also explains why the Empress has a grudge with the Order. She sees them as taking control in more ways than one, and this fuels her vendetta. Told Cash is dead, we then see as Harkonnen comes to Desmond. Harrow, MVP of the show for me, bloody legend, he's just as manipulative as the rest of the characters. With the council, we saw as he and Valia used each other. She needed to get in there to try and take out Desmond, and thus she had to attach to a house. He needed her to seem more important, and thus he'd get accepted into the Landsraad. So it's all plans within plans, and that's exactly what Harrow's doing here. This could also help open up a pathway in which the Harkonnens ascend to the top. Guy's not even upset that Robert Baratheon's just died, and Harrow, you bastard, bring me more wine. Anyway, as he closes the door, we can also see an ornament behind him. This is shaped like an hourglass, with it playing up the themes of time in the franchise. Telling Desmond that Valia made him do it, we see as he starts to get answers. I love how Desmond pulls out a chair, and it's playing into the themes of the throne. Desmond is at the side like how he is with the Emperor, but really he's in control. All there is in the chair is a weak, pathetic man, and the subtext here is absolutely brilliant. Once more, Desmond's pulling out the chair and letting the one in it think that they're winning. By sparing him, he wins his trust and also gets another enemy against the Gesserit. They also talk about the spice trade, and the guy gets a little sniff. Harrow exposes the Arrakeen smugglers and talks about how the rebels move through the underground market. Obviously, the sisters have plans within it, and Desmond wants proof Valia's involved. It's somewhat bittersweet that the Harkonnens are on the Landsraad now, as it fulfills Griffin's dream. However, it's only made herself an enemy in the end. Left with a small blue eye-like object, you can obviously see the metaphors in that. This also lights up and changes colour as Harrow touches it. So it's the idea of it awakening and leading towards a path in which we'll eventually get Leto the Worm, the big worm guy. This colouring is also used heavily with thinking machines, so I did wonder if that was indicating even Desmond breaking his own rules. Valia then discusses with Francesca how they, or more specifically the sisterhood, have been sidelined with the Emperor refusing a truthsayer. This is mirrored later in the episode when Natalia goes to Desmond. She explains how she herself's been sidelined, expecting power and influence, only for her husband to be taken by another woman and for the sisterhood to take over. So the Empress now wants to take on the sisterhood using Desmond. As we learn, he despises them due to being abandoned by Tula. I think this episode is all about loyalty as well. Francesca has the choice to be loyal to her son and lover, or to be loyal to the Order. Valia chooses them over her family, and you have things like Keiran's loyalty to the rebels or Inez. That's what I love about the show, and you're constantly guessing which side people are gonna go. I know I dumped on those first 2 episodes, but since 3, I think the show's gotten really good. Also, yeah, as per usual, I've had people calling me a shill and saying I get paid by the studio to say that. I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if the Warner Brothers would be like, call the first 2 episodes shit and then say it's good. That'll sell it to the fans. I do think the series is getting better though, and yeah, though I wish we had more than 1 episode left, I've enjoyed the last couple of entries. Now next up we see Desmond take his new insurgent finder general role and confront Keiran. This did remind me of another great HBO show that you might know, which is called Game of Thrones. Syrio Forel protected Arya Stark from being arrested during a sword fighting lesson, but that might be a reach. We also see Constantine do the same salute we saw Duncan Idaho and Paul do in the movies. In the book, Paul does this with the line being, Paul touched his forehead with his rapier blade held vertical. It seems like it's more of a salute fences do though, rather than it being tied to houses. Keiran berates him about how he has to take things seriously if he wants his father's respect, and this definitely plays into his actions. Guy even cuts the lesson short, and yet Constantine ends up defying the Swordmaster. Why Keiran cut this short is to all Michaela, and we later learn she's a native of Arrakis. This explains her eyes, and yeah, not really a hidden detail, but it's more just something we get confirmed. Michaela mocks that his cover's not blown, and obviously she's part of the sisterhood. Turns out she's got weapons herself, and Kieran's really suspicious.
I have my own sources, Atreides.
Just Kieran's look there, clearly suspects she's working with someone else, but I don't think he realises at this point how far it goes up. We then see the sample of Desmond's blood handed to the sisterhood. This is what Valia took last week, and they used the DNA indexing later on. This is all sorted by machines, showing how the Order is still using outlawed tech. The sisters stand in a circle just after receiving it, which mirrors the funeral of Raquel in episode 1. It also creates an eye shape and further plays into the series' iconography. However, you might also notice there's far fewer sisters there now. We cut to the acolytes overlooking this gathering, which helps to showcase the divide. In Sisterhood of Dune, they had Dorothea and Valia creating a civil war within the Order. The book played up this is why Valia killed her, but these fractures have continued to grow. It's also emphasized with the different colour uniforms, so we can clearly see the two sides. It shows there's distrust brewing, and we've already seen people reading the Orange Catholic Bible in secret. This hammers home the commandment that one should not create a machine in the likeness of the human mind. Thus, it's very anti-AI, whereas those that believe in the DNA indexing are completely relying upon it. This is what Dorothea wanted to destroy. She was devoutly dedicated to the teachings. It's much like modern religion, where a disagreement over a theological concept can lead to different religions forming, despite having almost identical beliefs. The dissenting side will likely be led by Lila, and I feel like Dorothea will take over. However, a different personality emerges first, who we then cut to next. Lila is recovering and discusses the nightmare everyone's having, which match what Raquel saw on her deathbed. These moments are shot in the same way, with her being framed exactly the same. It highlights that Lila has given her control, and this is why she talks about the vision on her deathbed. I do find it interesting that Lila mentions Shai-Hulud in an almost sacred term, just as the Emperor does later in the episode. We see her close her eyes, and she's then clearly tapping into her memory. I do wonder if this is actually the personas inside vying for control. In the book, we learn that when one takes the agony, you have to basically fight off the other personalities. Alia was unable to do this, and that she'd sometimes slip between other people. I feel like when Lila comes face to face with Valia, that the Dorothea side will fight to take control. This anger and vengeance will probably be too strong for the other personas to hold back, and I feel like that's the way we're gonna go. Again, she mentions that this wasn't just a nightmare, but it was pure prescience. This is what we saw Paul experience in the movies and in the books, and the Spacing Guild are able to fly the ships through vast distances by predicting a safe route. Slipping into what's known as abomination, the ego memory of Raquel really takes a hold.
What kind of abomination is this?
She warns that if Leto takes control, that humanity will begin to slip. This is something that happened in the work, with him deliberately oppressing the masses. Holding back spice and making people fall under his rule, he became a tyrant known as the God Emperor. However, this was all a plan, part of the quote-unquote golden path. In doing this, humanity would rebel and then spread further out than they ever had before. It would usher in a new golden age, but he had to rule through hatred for thousands of years. Now, I did love how she walks in and chastises Tula for her workstation being a mess. It's like when a strict teacher has returned after you've just been skiving off and you've had the TV in on wheels and they basically send in a substitute teacher. Those were the days, but she also puts on a slightly Scouse accent as well, which Raquel had. I think though that the paper's not a mess and she just needs to calm down. Calm down. Right, so Raquel mentions how she was right to trust the great work to Valia, which even here the students can't know about. We saw how illegal the use of thinking machines was, so the giant supercomputer borders on heresy and cannot be known to anyone outside the trusted inner circle. Even the death of Dorothea, it must be kept secret. Raquel/Lila looks almost distraught and angry as Tula subtly hints that Valia killed Dorothea. She says, "Your sister never wanes," and I do wonder if Raquel retains control, will she want to get revenge for her granddaughter and take the sisterhood back? The damage done by Desmond is something luckily she's seen before, and later she mentions how it's similar to the Omnius Plague. Raquel obviously fought against it in the war, and yet she still used AI in the DNA indexing. Because of this, I feel like she thinks she'll be able to do the same with Desmond and control him after they conquer him. Now in the source material, Raquel learned that Spice was able to actually slow down and cure the Omnius Scourge. This was so deadly though that it wiped out a vast number of humanity, and Omnius basically used it like smallpox blankets. Back with Harrow, we then see the wall mural with the dead whale in the middle. In case you missed our last breakdown, we pointed out how this is similar to the one on Arrakis. There we had the Great Worm, whereas here's another beast that's also used for profit. The worm is a creature that creates spice, whereas the whale fur is used with the Harkonnens. Wearing a wire, he then tries to get Valia to fess up, but she manipulates him and plays on his lust for power. Presenting the ring, this has a seal which allows him to rule the house. This is presented on messages and notes, and thus whoever holds it can order about the house. We then see Francesca try and urge the Emperor to give Constantine a position of power. However, the Emperor thinks he'd rather sleep around like a spoiled royal. I quite like though that this is a mirror opposite to Paul and Leto. Paul was a child of the Bene Gesserit and unsure of his place in the world, but he had the respect of his father and took initiative to become the great man that he did. Let's just forget about the huge amount of deaths during the Crusades, eh? The pair then end up kissing, but Francesca doesn't want to get caught in the crossfire between him and his wife. Cutting back to the temple, we get further eye imagery as we hover over the pool. It's here that we learn about Desmond's power, which is tied to the Omnious Plague. The books only ever really described it as a longer drawn out process, which had, I think, roughly a 70% mortality rate. This included the skin breaking out in hives and the person becoming paranoid. They'd get diarrhea, muscle weakness and fevers that then put them in a coma before they eventually died. Yay! The liver was also unable to break it down, which meant it was incurable. Desmond seems to have the evolution of this, with it now resting in the fear center. This idea of fear is also shared in the students as we learn they want to go home. This is what we see here, as Desmond's power are basically just an RNA virus. I believe that the virus is activated when you're afraid, and thus fear becomes the mind killer, so you just need to chill out. Now, we have mentioned how Rasputin's a clear inspiration for Desmond. The powers he's exhibited seem to be magical in nature, and Rasputin did present himself as a mystic, having faith-healing abilities when most likely his powers could be explained by science. Back on Seleucus Secundus, we then catch Michaela and Keiran as they fly over an eye-like structure. Desmond then enters the bar, and we see an eye-like light behind him on the wall. Suspecting the bar's a hotbed for insurgents, he ends up racking up shop. We even have insurgents within insurgents, as Michaela's an insurgent in the rebels. Desmond also discusses how she's betraying the people of Arrakis by profiting off the oppressive nature of harvesting spice. In Dune, we saw how the Fremen were reduced to being insurgents against the Harkonnens on Arrakis. The Empire relies on spice to function and run, and it's also hugely profitable. As we see, it elevated the Harkonnens from a backwater whaling family to being the most powerful house that even the Emperor relied upon. This discussion of hypocrisy is also mirrored later outside when Keiran implies she's willing to let her people on Arrakis live under oppression due to being what's best for the Imperium. Michaela then quotes the book directly and says,
God created Arrakis to train the faithful.
When crafting the work, Herbert wanted to create a clear parallel about how poverty and religion often go hand in hand. Those from poorer communities tend to have higher levels of faith. The people of Arrakis became besotted by the prophecy because it came with the idea that someone would come and save them. Thus they were looking for a savior and thus more open to Paul. This is why the South was even more devout than the North, because it was a much harsher place to live. Michaela obviously knows the prophecy's fake as she's part of the Order, and thus she's not swept up in it. We then see as the charges are armed, which, no prizes for guessing, look like eyes. We also see Desmond not wearing a mask while the rest of the soldiers are wearing them, which might show his immense immunity to spice, probably due to being swallowed up by a sandworm. Desmond also discovers Michaela's robes, and this happens as Keiran sees she's capable in combat. Recognizing the knife, these blades only belong to the sisterhood. Suddenly it all becomes clear, and the explosives detonate, which catch Desmond in the blast. Luckily, his shield protects him, and this is why charges and artillery were often built to slow down before hitting their target. This was seen in the ambush on Arrakeen when the Atreides ships were assaulted by the Harkonnens. Across with Constantine, we see him speaking to his mother, and they really hammer home how much they're shrouded in secrecy. He knows everything about the Crinos, but nothing about what happened with Francesca's side. The sisters never really bond with their children, and this is seen across the board. Raquella didn't bond with Dorothea, and Tula didn't bond or raise Desmond. Jessica was the only one who really did it, and this raised someone who stood up to the Order. Francesca also talks about how the Emperor is driven by fear. It all kind of plays into how fear is the mind killer and how it can lead to doubt and the loss of control. This is something the Acolytes are facing too, and it nicely plays upon the themes in the episode. In the end, Francesca reveals that Constantine was created solely with the purpose of protecting Inez. He's already done this and has fit the role perfectly. It's another element of control by the Order, and all in all, a plan within a plan. Cutting to Michaela telling Valia Desmond survived, Valia says,
There's a contingency plan for him.
Now it's theory time. So we still haven't seen Theo's face dancer powers come into effect. However, I feel like she's gonna mimic Desmond and basically frame him for a crime. This would then lose the Emperor's trust and make it so he went back to the sisters. Last week, Valia was willing to do a similar ploy in which he'd save the Emperor's life. At the end, Theo talked about sacrifice and it may be a case of her giving up her life. Valia could kill her if she appears like Desmond, and this would then win the Emperor's trust. It's also possible that she's the Empress at the end and going to seduce Desmond. Perhaps she's gonna slip in her own hidden blade, and yeah, let me know below exactly what you think. Either way, when you have a shapeshifter, you can bet they're gonna play someone close to higher up. Thus, I think she'll likely be used against Desmond, but yeah, again, let me know if you disagree. Now, Michaela's supposed betraying of her people is shown almost to be for naught, as the bar she built in her networks expired. All those years of building up the resistance and costing lives, it was only to go up in flames just so Francesca could manipulate the Emperor. It basically shows that the sisterhood chews people up and spits them out. Their plans are measured in centuries that zero thought of those who suffer. Michaela being told to betray her people is also something that she'll wrestle with. Whether she betrays the Order or not remains to be seen, but we witness Constantine discover Keiran's plans. Finding the holographic layout he took earlier in the season, this unearths his plot to attack the council. Keiran's then arrested, and I feel like we'll learn about his lineage later on. Last week, he did talk about how his father survived the Great Purge, I think he said, so it is clear that his dad was Albert. Either way, he's allowed Constantine to achieve his great purpose, and now he's proved himself to his father. Holding a banquet and announcing it, Inez is a bit gutted. Constantine is then put in charge of Arrakis, and it's also a sort of betrayal of his sister. She trusted him to stand up to their dad, but now he's just falling in line. We see Tula ask what she's even sacrificed, which is what we saw in the flashback episode. She could have had an amazing life for the Atreides boy, only for her to basically kill them in a blood feud. She's also given up her son and sent him to live a harsh life outside the Order. Later, we then see Inez furious at Keiran and witness him held up just like how Desmond was. This is through suspense tech, which the Baron would later use to get around. She asks if it really meant anything, but as we learn, he does really like her. He believes that his wishes aren't important though, and that what's most important is making a better life for everyone in the Empire. We also see her using her Truthsayer powers, which look incredibly cool, but it's also just basically a polygraph lie detector test. This then creates a third faction in the war, as we have the Sisterhood, the Empress with Desmond, and now Inez possibly wanting to usurp her father. Back with Lila, we then see she's back in control, but I do wonder how long this will last. Lila is extremely naive and probably not equipped to fight off the other egos. That's something that happened with the other characters affected by Abomination, and thus we'll see if she can remain in control. Lila, being a sort of passenger to the possession, really reminded me a lot of the movie Talk to Me, where spirits would possess people for a short amount of time. Following Tula to an eye-shaped platform, we witness as Desmond's DNA is processed. I love how this is all presented like a family tree with these branches coming together. Now, Desmond was clearly conceived the night of the Great Cull, so he was basically born out of this blood feud, and now he's come back to take down everyone. This twisted idea of love is then spread across the characters, and as she seduces Desmond, Francesca seduces the Emperor. Well, it does take two to tango, but you know what I mean. In the end, we learn how closing the truth about Desmond, which is gonna lead to some very interesting plot threads. Tula's gonna have to choose between the Order or her son, and it again plays into the idea of her sacrifices. If she sides with the witches, then that'll be with her sister, and she'll have made a deal with the devil. However, if she goes with her son, then she'll have to kill her sister and the Order, so yeah, lots of interesting ways they can go with it. Obviously though, this series is a prequel, so we kinda know who comes out on top. However, I'm interested to see how it plays out, and I'd love to hear theories for next week. As of making this video, I haven't seen the finale trailer, so if there's any other insight, then please drop it below. Please hit the thumbs up while you're there as well, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. For 99 cents a month, you'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes a massive way towards helping us out. Now if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown on screen right now. Without the way, huge thank you for sitting through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.